I just urge people to be very cautious. Even if you went to some of these websites like memecoin.com, you can literally see a pie chart of the fact that 80% is owned by insiders and they've pre-mined it and they're issuing it to themselves, and then 20% is sold to the public. Do you really want to own something like that? You're probably going to have to time it and trade in and out. And to me, that's very risky. It's basically like gambling at a casino. I try to avoid it. And I'm really disappointed that Trump isn't focusing just on Bitcoin, but I do think he will get there. I do think that in the future, we will have much more clarity. We will better understand what are crypto securities, what are stable coins, why Bitcoin is so special and so different and will be a part of a strategic reserve. I think that that is coming. And a lot of the rest that's out there is just noise.
Welcome back to the Block Fuel podcast. Today we have Natalie Brunell, host of Coin Stories, one of the hottest Bitcoin podcasts, and someone that's been in the space a while. We also have Sean Ristau, my esteemed colleague and co-host, and Avi is out at a conference today, so he's not joining us. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
no, thanks for coming on, Natalie. We were just talking right before we got on the actual recording. You're natively from Chicago, so it's such a small world, and me being in Chicago myself, did not realize that. I have to be honest. But why don't we dive right into it, and let's just start with the crypto ball. You were there last week. Tell us about it. How was that event? Definitely, I think I've seen a lot of some memes online of your dress versus someone else.
Yeah.
It's definitely stirred the pot.
Well, it was all in good spirit. Yeah, no, it was an amazing event. It was the inaugural crypto ball. It was also a little bit of AI because David Sachs is the incoming crypto and AI czar, and it was sort of partially his event, and BTC Inc. was one of the organizers. I'm very grateful I got an invitation. It was amazing. I mean, the energy was just so positive. Everybody's so excited. I was hoping our president was going to be there and make an appearance and say something positive about Bitcoin, but unfortunately he was at an event in New York. But a lot of really prominent people were there, the big CEOs, politicians, TV news anchors, all of that. So it was a really fun night. And yes, I decided to make a statement with my dress because I think that Bitcoin is going to be a very important topic. There's my photo. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a very important tool that we embrace as a country over the next 4 years. And I think that we really need to actually get down to the heart of what's wrong. And that is that our financial system is broken. We need to fix the money. And so I wanted to make that statement with my dress because I actually think this is really a peaceful solution and a peaceful revolution. And I understand actually the movement behind tax the rich because I used to be in that movement. I used to believe that that's how we fix things. And that's how we close the wealth concentration gap. And I was wrong. I needed to study economics and humble myself. And I'm so glad that I found Bitcoin because I think Bitcoin is the real solution.
That's interesting. I don't think we've ever had somebody on here, Jody, that's said, that they used to be on the other side saying tax the rich. And, now you have really fix the money Bitcoin. What was it, Natalie, that what was that aha moment, if you will?
I mean, it was really just better understanding our financial system, how money works, how the banking industry works, fractional reserve banking, how money's issued, and understanding why we need hard money, why we need something like Bitcoin. Because yes, before I thought that the problem was greed and that the fix was for government to come in and redistribute the wealth. And I was wrong. I just didn't understand economics. I didn't understand capitalism. I was looking at it through the wrong frame of mind. And when you think about it, I mean, tax the rich, that comes with a sense of force, a sense of coercion and confiscation. Whereas Bitcoin fixes the base layer of all of our economic activity so that we can really create value for one another. It peacefully fixes the whole monetary system, which is how we all interact globally. And it's, I think, a solution that brings about the most hope and opportunity for everyone. So I really hope I get to talk with AOC. I think she's going to be a big Bitcoin proponent. And I understand her mission. I think that she really does want to do good for society. But I think there are a lot of people out there that are misinformed, even at the top levels of government and business, who just don't understand really how much harm our financial system has done to the working class.
Well said, especially not being prepared. We threw this up on the screen and threw you to the fire. Specifically with, just going off of this, AOC, is your approach, would your strategy be, you're sitting down with her and you're saying, hey, there's just been this accredited investor rule that's been in place, lower income classes haven't been able to access, hedge fund like returns, haven't been able to access, interesting financial products that as inflation rises, all these asset classes are rising in value. And Bitcoin comes along and anyone can mine it. Anyone can participate in the system. Anyone can go in pretty much and buy it, especially these days with a variety of apps and on-ramps. Or what is your approach? Is that it? Or do you start with something else?
Well, I like to meet people where they are. And I think that AOC rose from a very, blue collar working class position. I think she was a bartender right before she was elected. And so she felt the plight of the working class and she wanted to, I think, do something good. And that's why she wanted to run for office. I think a lot of people get into Washington and they have great intentions, but we have to judge them by their outcomes, right? And so I think it's her responsibility now to study a tool like Bitcoin, which is a neutral technology that addresses what I believe is our biggest issue within the financial system. And that is that there's a monopoly over money and central banks can manipulate it. They can manipulate interest rates and the supply of money, and inflation at the core robs the working class. It bakes theft into the cake. And I think we need to start to question that. Why do we have a system that's based on theft? And why can't we have a system where we interact peacefully with one another through true capitalism, where the price of goods and the price of interest rates is decided by a free market? I think we need to really evaluate why our financial system works this way and who gets an advantage, because the things that she's pointing out, the reason that the wealthy have gotten so wealthy is because our financial system creates a Cantillon effect, and the people closest to the money printer benefit the most because our monetary unit is abused and manipulated. So I think that if she better understood really the system at its core and understood how something like Bitcoin addresses it, I think she'd be one of the biggest Bitcoin proponents, actually. So I think it's about meeting people where they are. And I really do share in her frustration with how the working class has been left behind.
Wow. So where did you get the idea to do the dress? And did you know about the ball beforehand, like a little heads up? Or was it more like, it seemed like it literally came out of like left field?
It did. It was very last minute. I did not know that I was going to the crypto ball until about a week and a half before the event. And I was talking with one of my mentors and we were just kind of throwing out ideas. He asked what I was going to wear. And I didn't know at the time. I thought I was just going to recycle one of my gowns. And then we were just kind of joking around and thought about the Met Gala where AOC wore that dress. And I thought, what if we made a different statement that was about Bitcoin? And then I thought it was kind of impossible because I don't have any designers in my Rolodex. But my mentor actually had a friend who's a designer based in Southern California. His name is Michael Boyes. And so he actually was able to make this come together. I ordered a dress that I thought would fit, and I wanted to do opposite colors from what AOC had. And so I sent it to him. I shipped it without ever having the chance to try on the dress. So I really didn't even know if it would fit and if it would work. He had a seamstress named Gladys who was able to sew the letters on and make it look so beautiful. And they shipped it to me and I got it a few hours before the event. I tried it on. It was a little bit too big, but it worked and I proudly wore it. And I'm just so grateful to Michael and Gladys and their whole team for putting it together on such short notice.
That's fantastic. That's great to see that it came together. And it's always good. I never complain myself when things are a little too big. It's usually like, I'm usually mad when I'm like, oh man, why doesn't that fit?
It would have been worse if it was too small. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
I had a backup dress ready to go. So
also it's like the message itself isn't, inflammatory. It's not like coming or attacking, AOC directly.
No.
I feel like, like the wording and the phrasing is also so important these days.
No, and it was very much
how you invite
inspired
people
by
in,
her.
right?
Yeah, it wasn't an attack. It was inspired by her and it was presenting a different solution. It really is. And I genuinely would love to have a conversation with her because I know a lot of people get so polarized today politically and especially with social media, things can get so charged. But I think if we dig deeper beyond the surface messages and the surface insults and the surface debates, if we really dig into the core, they will find increasingly it's our financial system and we can all get on the team of wanting to fix it.
Yeah. Jody, turn it over to you.
Yeah. So, continuing on that theme, during the crypto ball, Trump launches a meme coin. 2 days later, Melania launches a meme coin. And without going into discussion deep into like the merits of meme coins, we've discussed this actually in Chicago this week with Security Traders Association. But really, I think tying that in with executive order yesterday, where he's talking about national digital asset stockpile. And one thing that people that are firm believers in Bitcoin and have been really going from from like Bitcoin Nashville, where Trump came and spoke, have been lobbying, have been donating. And they're wondering, like, what do we think of this? Like, how do we look at this, shift from, and I'll pull up this like Travis Kling tweet, which I saw and I was like, oh, this came up on my feed. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Is like, what happened between the Nashville conference and today where the word Bitcoin wasn't included in the executive order a single time. And then like a follow-up question was based on the executive order yesterday, I believe, where it's like in the National Digital Assets Stockpile. And so different communities are talking about like, hey, like, would we even want that if it included a Ripple or, all these different, alternative cryptocurrencies that aren't Bitcoin, and that's not what we donated for. I don't necessarily have the best take to be able to like tell an outsider how to feel about it, but what are some of your initial reactions to these actions?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion right now. And I just remember the beginning of my own Bitcoin journey, which was, oh my gosh, this can't be something completely legitimate. Maybe it's a scam. Oh, it's used for nefarious activities. And it's also very expensive compared to all these other cryptocurrencies. And how can they be so different, right? They're all based on sort of the same technology. I just didn't get it. And I remember what that was like. And I remember kind of being in the fog of crypto. And I really had to put in the work to understand how truly different Bitcoin was and why it was truly decentralized and why the energy component was so important. And once I made it through that, which took time, it really did. It took a few years. Then I started to realize that I only want to put my focus on Bitcoin because this is what I see truly laying a new foundation globally for the future of capital and the future of savings. I think that the people advising Trump right now, he has people that I don't agree with the advice that he's giving him. I don't think that Trump understands really the true difference. He also launched an NFT a while back, and I don't know if he really knows the difference between maybe these meme coins and really something like an NFT, right? He loves to put out things from merchandise and all of that his fans and supporters can purchase. It starts to go into the gray area of what is a security. That's the whole issue surrounding regulatory clarity that hopefully we'll figure out over the next couple of years. What constitutes a digital security versus a digital commodity like Bitcoin? And when you have an issuer, I would, recommend to your viewers or listeners who are kind of new to this, if there is an issuer, if there's a team behind it and you could literally look up their LinkedIn profiles and they're the ones issuing it and they own maybe 80% of it and they're insiders, then that looks very much like a security. And to me, there's a lot of risk in that. And so I think there's some debate right now as to what this whole industry will look like in a couple of years, because crypto is arguing that, hey, today we can trade these tokens 24/7. And why should it take $40 million in order to go public? Like, we need to update these laws from basically the 1930s. And I understand where they're coming from, but that doesn't mean that, you should be able to drop whatever you want on an unsuspecting investor and not disclose properly what the risks is and what these coins or protocols are and what people are investing in. So I just urge people to be very cautious. Even if you went to some of these websites like memecoin.com, you can literally see a pie chart of the fact that 80% is owned by insiders and they've pre-mined it and they're issuing it to themselves, and then 20% is sold to the public. Do you really want to own something like that? You're probably going to have to time it and trade in and out. And to me, that's very risky. It's basically like gambling at a casino. I try to avoid it. And I'm really disappointed that Trump isn't focusing just on Bitcoin, but I do think he will get there. I do think that in the future, we will have much more clarity. We will better understand what are crypto securities, what are stable coins, why Bitcoin is so special and so different and will be a part of a strategic reserve. I think that is coming. And a lot of the rest that's out there is just noise.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And what a lot of people from the conference we were at this week, a lot of people have said, well, what, to your point of like, does he even know much about like as much as he's saying? Or, I actually think it's probably his sons are the ones driving some of this behind that, because you see what tokens, that worldwide investment or whatever they have, like that
World
they've
Liberty,
been, that they've been buying. And I agree 100% with everything you just said, though. I couldn't literally, as somebody coming from capital markets, I could not agree more that it probably was not the wisest move to do that. Doesn't set a good precedent. But then he turns around later in the week and pardons Ross Ulbricht. And I mean, you've had people that say, yay, nay. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I would love for people to listen to my latest news blog because I acknowledge the fact that there is controversy surrounding his pardon. And I read two tweets that I think best summarize sort of the whole situation. Yes, Ross Ulbricht was responsible for creating the Silk Road, which facilitated illicit activities. People were able to buy things like drugs on the website, and that is wrong. He facilitated the ability for people to conduct illegal activities. But But the Silk Road wasn't just that. I mean, people traded art and collectibles, and he was a person who believed in radical freedom and in a true free marketplace where people can interact with one another without necessarily middlemen, right? Because he was a big proponent of Bitcoin since the very beginning, and that was the currency that was used in the Silk Road. And so for someone who has gotten to know his story a little bit more, what the Bitcoiners were saying is this is someone who was a freedom advocate, who was a non-violent first-time offender. Should he have really received a double life sentence without the possibility of parole? Because you can look out at our criminal justice system is completely flawed and broken and corrupt, but there are people who have done far worse who didn't get such serious sentences. And so it's really, I mean, he did serve time, and a lot of Bitcoiners felt like that just was not the right punishment. And he's someone who really does believe in just our ability to freely engage in commerce with one another. And so was it a crime? Yes. But was it something deserving 2 life sentences? A lot of people would say no. So I think a lot of people are really grateful that President Trump really did keep his promise, because this was something that he said he would do. This means that actions and advocacy, letting your voice be heard, it can actually result in the outcome that you want. I mean, a lot of people didn't expect for him to be freed, but Trump kept his promise and change was made, and he's now a free man.
I actually have to apologize. I'm going to leave you with Jody, but fantastic meeting you. Definitely would like to get together here in Chicago, and definitely will be watching your show more and more.
Oh, thanks.
And Jody, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll talk with you guys later.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Sean. Natalie, so kind of next thing, before we get too dry into like too many of these executive orders, we'll end on one like SAB 121, looking at banks' ability to hold Bitcoin through like current accounting rules. And this is something that we've seen, we got, I think, repealed last night, something that Michael Saylor had mentioned. And you had an interview with him, which was an excellent interview. We saw maybe like a month and a half ago. And that was something that was like holding him back a little bit from being able to say custody at JP Morgan and hold his Bitcoin there. And some of these like, strategically important banks that would be able to like offer to these corporates that are bringing on Bitcoin to their balance sheet just a lot more like financing options. What do you think is kind of the impact of that? Do you follow MicroStrategy? I know it's Michael Saylor's, company, but people in the Bitcoin camp are like, hey, like that's a lot of financial engineering, it's public markets, you're issuing debt. They're not sure how to like think of it as it relates to pure Satoshi white paper, Bitcoin economics. What's your kind of overall take on MicroStrategy? And then like, what do you think about banks custodying Bitcoin in general?
Okay, well, I'll start with SAB 121 because I think that this is a huge catalyst and milestone. I think the ETFs were one milestone, and the FASB rules changing so that we have fair value accounting. We could actually mark up Bitcoin on balance sheets. That was fantastic. And now, big banks being able to custody Bitcoin is huge. And this was a very controversial, restrictive bulletin that was put in place by the SEC because obviously in the previous administration, they were very hostile to the entire industry. And we knew it was kind of an imminent repeal because both sides, Republicans and Democrats, voted to have this be repealed. And unfortunately, Biden vetoed it. So it was only a matter of time if the administration turned over to Trump that this was going to happen. And so, yes, I mean, I think this is a turning point. I think now it will open the door for more institutional adoption. And it'll be interesting to see because some of the banks out there, including Chase, led by Jamie Dimon, they've spoken out against Bitcoin, even though they've been dealers and they've been involved in the ETFs. They've still spoken out largely against Bitcoin. Yeah. And now I think they're going to be custodying it and offering solutions and allowing people to hold Bitcoin, borrow against the Bitcoin. So this is just going to open the door for a lot more adoption. And I think it's actually really huge. I don't know if it's necessarily priced in yet. And I think that the price doesn't really reflect how much movement and momentum is going to go into Bitcoin. As for MicroStrategy, I think Michael Saylor is brilliant. I think he's really done the math, and there's no one who is more generous with his time and knowledge in wanting to share this so that every company and individual benefits from Bitcoin. And he puts up these charts that, at the end of the day, he's this brilliant businessman. He has led MicroStrategy for decades. He has seen his stock price fall and rise to these all-time highs that I think no one would have believed, but he really did his homework. He really was thoughtful. And the way that he explains Bitcoin is a way that anyone can understand. You don't have to be a sophisticated financial scientist or engineer to understand the strategy. It is the most perfectly engineered money. It is perfect capital. And he shows all the flaws that exist in other forms of stores of value, which he, as a business leader, has encountered for many years. It's like, how do you keep your company growing? And how do you outgrow the pace of monetary inflation. And he uses a benchmark of basically the S&P 500 and how much it has increased as sort of that level of the monetary expansion that you have to try to outgrow. And it's very, very difficult for the average company to continue to outpace, 10%. And so he's found Bitcoin, which has an average, the compound annual growth rate over 20%. And that's if you're being very conservative. And so he's modeled out what this looks like and why it's really the best treasury asset that a company can embrace. And he's laying out the playbook for all these other corporations. He's taking the time to educate companies like Microsoft and any company really that will listen to him. And I think that he's going to, he's going to profit a lot from that, both financially as his company, but also I think this is like a personal mission for him. I've done many interviews with Michael Saylor, and I think this is now a part of his legacy. He feels like this will help humanity and it will empower the most amount of people. And it's something that it's the tide that lifts all boats. It's not about making the wealthy wealthier. It's about making everyone have more economic empowerment from the ground up, from average person in any country to the people who are leading businesses like him and governments. Like this will lift all of us. And so I love his strategy and I think that he will take the world by storm.
Yeah, we're big MicroStrategy fans. We don't always understand, like the different financial pieces of it on corporate finance, but it's fascinating to follow. Speaking of interviews, you come from more of a traditional journalist background. What was your catalyst or process getting into the industry? And then how do you stay afloat in a sense or like navigate the right paths, in a place that from the outside, there's plenty of reasons for people to think it's very scammy. I'm sure like, in Illinois, growing up in your town, like you probably have people that are like lawyers or doctors or, doing something that's not tech or software or new technology related that are like, why is she in this scammy industry? And from the outside, you really can't tell like who good actors are and who bad actors are. So like, how does like Natalie maintain a good actor like status?
I don't think that people look at it as like a scammy industry, but I think they see it as very risky. I think a lot of my colleagues or friends that don't understand Bitcoin, they're worried for me. They think I've basically put all my eggs into a basket that ultimately will fail. But I don't believe so. I've put enough work in to know that I think that I'm just on the beginning of a massive technological shift. And we've seen them happen. I was very young when the internet started to come out. And I remember I was a journalist before and I watched a lot of television news growing up. And it was so funny to watch some of the newscasters when the internet first came out, right? Talk about like, what's the @ sign and what is all this? And nobody had the foresight except for the people building in the industry. No one had the foresight to be like, oh, this is going to radically transform how we communicate and how we do business. And if we rewind time, I wasn't around when we moved from horses to cars or from candlelight to electricity, but I'm sure that these technological shifts were also met with a lot of resistance and skepticism and like, what are these people doing? This is crazy. And now we're living through that only with money. And so for me, it's just been the most fulfilling, amazing experience, not just getting to become an entrepreneur and actually creating a path for myself, going from journalism to hosting my own show and running a media company, but just this idea that the total addressable market for Bitcoin is the world. I mean, entrepreneurs around the world create goods and services, but they could probably only sell to like a certain population, right? Not everyone is going to get whatever they're creating. But with Bitcoin, I think the whole world is going to be buying Bitcoin or earning Bitcoin through work. And it's like we spend our time to earn money. And that money that we earn right now can just be printed by a central bank. It could be printed by a group of people that none of us elected, and they could just expand the supply by 2 times, 5 times, however much they want, or they can contract the supply. They can manipulate our money that we exchange our time and energy and effort for. And so why don't we move to a system where no one can do that, where we work and we are in a system that's based on rules, where no rulers are governing how much the money is actually worth. And we see what kind of value we can create for one another. And we see how we can interact with one another in a more fair way, where competition truly rewards merit and value. And that excites me because I think that we're, again, at the beginning stages of this paradigm shift that maybe we who are adults won't even get to reap all the benefits. We won't be able to sit under the shade of that tree. We're just planting the seeds. But it's so exciting because I think that the future generations are going to have a much easier time than my generation did. And my background, if people are familiar with me and my show, I come from a very, very working class background. My parents worked so hard. They're first generation immigrants. And then just as they were finally able to afford a home outside of Chicago, when I was a teenager, they lost it in the great financial crisis. And I saw them struggle so much. And I saw the wealthy getting bailed out, right? Getting bonuses and bailed out. And that's why I was like, we got to tax the rich. And I just didn't understand. I didn't understand that our money's broken and we can fix our money. And that's why I believe in Bitcoin so much.
You're writing a book or wrote a book, and it'll be published this year. No specific date. We're not committing to anything, but that really ties into education. So your focus with the book is on education and this ethos of like, hey, what do we take? How do we set up the next generations? What is your kind of like curriculum? What's your kind of like, you don't have to tell us what all is in the book, but would love like kind of your angle, your spin that we should be looking forward to on how you're educating people on Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, the book is meant for the mainstream audience. It is called Bitcoin is for Everyone. And so I'm trying to make this approachable for literally all ages, all backgrounds. And it excites me because I've read every single Bitcoin book twice. Some of them I've read 3 or 4 times. And I think that I've taken nuggets sort of from each one, because sometimes you read a book and, oh, this is great for someone who has maybe more of a technical background or is into computer science or programming. And then maybe you read another one and it feels very academic or it's very heavy on the monetary history. There's always, something little you want to pull from each one. And so that's what I tried to do to create one comprehensive, everyday person's guide to Bitcoin, what the problem is, because I think you have to really fully understand the problem and how the problem came to be, and then understanding the solution, which is Bitcoin, and presenting like all the hope and opportunity that it provides. So the story arc is basically, let's get on the same page of the problem. What is the problem? How did we get here? And why is Bitcoin the best solution?
Yeah, that's kind of like a tangent, but I was watching a great video. It's like a 30-minute long video. Go look on YouTube. It's Gordon Ramsay and Matthew McConaughey. So not 2 Bitcoin figures, but they're both sitting there cooking steak and eggs. So it's like this kind of like, almost carpool karaoke, but it's like kitchen karaoke of them just like talking and sharing stories. And one of the topics was Gordon Ramsay's talking about, Green Lights, which is Matthew McConaughey's book, which is done really well. And it's like his, life story. And, he talks about how as he made it more personal, as he stopped trying to write impressively, the writing got better because people could really attach themselves to it and see themselves in many ways. And one piece was that so many people, let's say like yourself, that have a lot of experience in the space, read a lot of books. You also want to like be on the top tier of like, this is complex. I know like what UTXOs are. I know all of these complex things of running a node. But really, Matt McConaughey is saying like, look, like I want to show my kid this book, but he's, 12. And like I heard him listening to the audiobook one day, but I was like, son, like you're not ready yet. Like it's not really going to sink in with you. You're not ready for like to learn about your dad in this light and like soak that in. And so in your way, like getting to your book, I think we need more people like bridging the gap of like, let's not do a very, intense, like, hey, here's the Bitcoin economy. Here's how everything's going to work, because people need to understand the problems first. People need to understand just like basic money concepts. And we don't teach that in schools. We don't have a lot of really good personal finance in any school. And I think that's something we're really passionate about at Blockfuel is like, hey, how can we like at least get some of these basic things, in line and find right people and like voices that can start getting people on very just, hey, this is the issues that you have. Here's why someone controlling 80% of the supply of any coin, president or not, is not typically a good thing, as well as it being able to print money.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted it to be an approachable starting point. There are so many resources out there, but I wanted to show that someone who has no financial MBA or expertise, someone who doesn't come from an engineering background, someone who really, I came from the working class and I understand their frustrations. If I can understand Bitcoin, you can understand Bitcoin. And like, let's go on this journey together and really understand how important it is. Because yes, you're right. We don't get taught this in school, but that doesn't mean that it's not important, that it's not valid, that it's not truthful, and that, it's out of reach for people to learn about. And I think that this is the most important thing that people could self-educate on. I think that financial literacy is so incredibly important. And I hope to just be, one small voice that helps with that. And I hope that being a woman also, it attracts more women to try to understand the space, because it's disproportionately male driven. And you can see that on Bitcoin Twitter Twitter, X. You can see it when you go to the conferences, and they've done so many studies that show it's really mostly men dominating the space when it comes to investing. And I look at that as an opportunity. That means that there's a whole wave of women, especially women my age and millennials, that are going to embrace this. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. And I think there's studies I wouldn't be able to reference, but women typically make smarter, sometimes too conservative financial decisions. But as we're looking at like altcoins and all of these different financial engineering that happen, really, I think Bitcoin could speak to a lot of like the female audience who's known to be better at sometimes investing because they're not they're not taking a risk on every single trade that they're doing. They're like being a little more thoughtful on that. Switching gears a little bit. So you have a spouse partner that's also in the space, and Bitcoin trades 24/7. The news cycle trades 24/7. X never goes to sleep. Do you have anything to shut off? Or do you have any rules that like you're like, hey, like no more price action, no more like news. I don't need to see this clip. Like, how have you managed that like work-life balance?
I think it's an advantage that we have this shared passion. It brought us together. We actually grew up in the same hometown and never knew each other until Bitcoin. So 3 decades later, we finally found each other, even though we literally spent our childhoods in the same building, which is crazy. So we're both just really, we believe in the future being Bitcoin, and we don't look at the price a lot. So that's good. We're not like shouting out the price to each other. And we both have interests outside of Bitcoin. I'm really passionate about things like cooking, and I love travel, but we just love that we both are so passionate and excited about Bitcoin, and we follow it closely. But you know, when you love something, it doesn't feel like work. So yes, we're kind of always working, but we don't feel like we're working. It's good for us.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find someone like that. My wife is very supportive, but she does not. She does not dive into the Bitcoin content by any means. I'm gonna have to convince her to let me get a miner out in the garage or office. So Natalie, we really appreciate you taking the time. It's great catching up. Phenomenal work at the Crypto Bowl. What's the best way to follow you? Like, I know you have your own podcast. You're doing news segments. Like, what's kind of your regular content schedule, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so my podcast is available on every platform. So I share episodes on X, on all the podcast audio platforms, as well as YouTube. I do at least one interview episode a week, and I do one news update, which is about 10 minutes or less. I try to keep it within a block. And so if you want something that's very digestible, you can listen to it on your drive, or when you're, just running out to the grocery store and get 10 minutes of just everything happening in the Bitcoin world and the greater economy. And you can message me on Twitter at Nat Brunell, on Instagram at Natalie Brunell. And I'm very, very active online. So I try to get in there on all the Bitcoin conversations.
Yeah, amazing. Natalie, it's been a pleasure. We're looking forward to the book. We'll try to get you back on if you have time. You're going to be big by then to talk about the book once it's out. And we more things to come. I don't think the executive orders are going to slow down anytime soon. It's been a busy 2 weeks.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.